So, how to use different props. So last video I told you about some of the different props that we can commonly find, and now I'm going to tell you a little bit about how they can be used. So the cork foam, particle foam brick, I'm going to call it, I quite like using for sitting down during meditation or at the beginning or end of class. But also it's quite nice for using to support your knee if you have a sore knee when you are lunging. It's also nice that if your knee is sore or your ankle feels quite tender, you can put your shin on it so that your ankle doesn't have to be as flexed in the plantar shape. So then you're not even putting your knee on the ground. It's also nice to use for your head because it's not so high like a block that your head might feel cranked, but it does give your head a little bit of a lift. So if you can see the difference, my neck here is a little bit lifted and my chin feels a bit more neutral, as opposed to when my head is down on the floor, there's a little bit more strain in my neck. Not big strain that I would feel stress from it, but there is a noticeable feel change to that. And then if I swap that out with a block, there's just that little bit more lift, so it starts to get a little bit of stretch and pull into the back of my neck. None of these things are necessarily good or bad against the other. It just depends on what you need for your practice and what the intention is you have set for yourself for each part of the practice and poses. And if you're confused about what that even means when I say what intention, I'll talk about that again in another video. Now, other props. Let's get back to props. So the blocks are great, like I said, for your head, but they're also really good to help bring the floor a little bit higher or make your arms a little bit longer. For example, if you are in hands and knees and you want to step your foot through, I don't need to do that with my hands on the floor because it is a lot harder. Even though I've been practicing for a long time, my arms are still not longer than my legs. So using a block can really help. Also, if you're going up into a higher pose, you can use the blocks there to help with balance. Or for example, if you go into extended side angle, that makes the floor a little bit higher for when you're reaching the poses, or triangle pose. Or even into a twist, having the block a little bit, raising your arm a little bit can really enhance that. Other ways the block can come in handy is you can grip the blocks and use them for down dog, as long as your mat and block are sticky enough against each other. There's always the risk of sliding, which is not always as much fun, but it puts a little bit less weight in your wrists and more weight into your feet, which can feel nice if you have a little bit more tender wrists. The blocks are also really good to add some challenge to balances. Whee! Or, I don't know, get creative. You can use it for all sorts of things. It helps keep your legs together in chair pose, helps keeps your arms focused. So the blocks come in really handy, which is why they are one of the key things that I quite like to encourage people to use in a lot of practices. Now, using your bolster is really great for more of the relaxing types of practices. So it is really nice, especially for the end of yoga, to put under your knees. This is a very popular version of Shavasana, which is corpse pose. Just to support your knees a little bit there. The bolsters are also really good, pardon me, for when you might be a little bit larger or expecting a child or recovering from something and there's just more tender areas or things are a bit swollen. You can use the bolsters in a really nice way to make things feel a little bit softer and make the ground a little bit more comfortable. Now the sturdy blanket is really nice, like I said, can be used very similarly to the cork block. But you can also fold it out or roll it up. Sometimes I like to have the sturdier blanket rolled up and put in between my shins. In between my calf and hamstrings, I mean. Not in between my shins. In between my calves and hamstrings. Or to have it to support my knees. Or even to put my wrists on so my fingers can still be gripping, but my wrists are slightly elevated when I'm in hands and knees. Because that amount of flexing in the wrists is not natural for everybody, so you might need a little bit of a lift to help that. There are also things you can get like cork wedges that are used for helping support the lift of your wrists or heels for different yoga practices, but that's another thing to add to it all. So I quite like just using a blanket. Your strap. Now, the strap is great because it can be used to help you reach things that are hard to reach. So for example, in a seated forward fold, your feet might be too far away, so you can use the strap. And then all of a sudden you can get that little bit of tension, that little bit of push-pull without feeling like you're, I don't know, hunching over everything to try to get to your feet. It's also nice to use for your arms or when you're on your back. It just really helps to grab onto things. Having a pillow is really nice, just as a substitute for the blankets or the bolsters, or even in some cases the blocks. But the cushions are just there to make more of the relaxing practices more comforting. The towel is a nice one to use for creating a bit of pressure into areas, or a bit of a lift into areas that might feel uncomfortable. So for example, in that same seated forward fold, you can use the towel rolled up and put it under your knees. So if your knees hyperextend, if you're in one of these poses, it might sometimes feel like your knee is bending backwards. But put that rolled up towel there and you get a little bit more space for your knee to feel a bit more supported. Additionally, if you have very tight ankles, the rolled up towel can be nice to put under your ankles, and then sitting on your heels might not feel quite as difficult. And again, the rolled up towel is also nice to use, similar to how I said with that blanket, putting under the heels of your hands so your fingers can come down. You can even have your hands a bit wider and try to use that for downward facing dog. But it is a little bit more slippery, so it does take a bit more muscular effort. Your blanket is great for all sorts of things, but mostly just to get cozy at the end of class, keep yourself warm during meditation, or to start and warm yourself up with. A stick, a dowel, whatever you want to call it, can come in really handy to help with balance. So if you are trying to do things where you might be lifting your leg, the stick comes in handy. But also in some of the functional mobility classes I use, we use the stick to roll out some of the fascia that can sometimes get tight. And finally the yoga wheel, which I almost never use because nobody has them. So I mostly just use this for my personal practice, but I quite like it for practicing back bends or even sometimes to sit on. But it's used in all sorts of different creative ways. Some people prefer to use it for a back bend to help get into things like the wheel pose. But the older I get, the less I use it. So it might be just a prop for decoration rather than a prop for use. So hopefully that helps. If you have any questions about any other props, then please let me know. I will be doing a separate video specifically about chairs and how they can help with yoga. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and let me know if you have any questions. questions and stay tuned for the next video.